Hello and welcome to Coffee with Stephen, something a little bit different. Rather than covering the basics of performance testing, I'm going to be talking about a topic around performance testing and analysis or software performance which is of interest to me, just for 5 minutes, with a cup of coffee. Before I start, I would like to preface this by saying that these are my own views and not necessarily those of my employer. But in saying that, my title in the organization I work for is performance engineer. Do I engineer performance as part of my job? Not really. And I don't think that many of us really do. I don't like the term performance engineer. I think it's misused. So what would it be? What would it mean to be a performance engineer? What would that mean? I think that in order to be a performance engineer, you would need to be building in performance into software solutions. And if you're not doing that, I don't think you're working as a performance engineer. So what might that look like? One way is that you might be involved in the architecture or design phase to actually design software solutions which perform well in the first place. Great, that's awesome. There are a whole set of performance issues that cannot be fixed after it's been designed and implemented. So there's huge amounts of value at catching performance issues right early on in that design phase. But how many of us do that? I'm not involved in that. I'm trying to get involved in that, but I'm not doing that. I would imagine that most people that call themselves or are called performance engineers don't get involved in this at all. The other side of it is the idea of coaching. So going into a delivery team and helping them to manage their own performance risk through understanding performance, maybe doing performance testing, maybe implementing coding standards, or helping them to understand how they can build fantastically performing software. And people do this, but I would say the majority of people who call themselves performance engineers aren't involved in this at all. So are we performance engineers? I would say probably not. So what's the difference between a performance tester and a performance engineer? I think at the end of the day, the performance engineer is a rebranding of the performance tester, and I do think there's a reason for it. But let's look at the difference between a performance test engineer and a performance engineer. Now, we all know there are test engineers, and I think that makes sense. If you're building an automation framework, for example, for an organization, then you are engineering something, a test suite, a bunch of test assets for a purpose. And performance testers do the same thing. We often build these test suites, build test assets, we build a framework of some kind. But that's performance test engineering. It's not performance engineering. They're quite different things. One is the thing which performance testers have always done, maybe at a grander scale, but it's the same thing. But actually building in performance, now that's something new. So what's the intention behind the word performance engineer, the title? What's the intention behind it? I think there is a genuine desire to take performance testing to the next level, to something more valuable. So not just doing black box performance testing, not just running a test, getting results, handing them over, but actually taking responsibility to try and investigate and diagnose the problem, and if possible, help to fix it. I think that there is something around the word performance engineer which is about someone who is able to tackle modern software delivery. So agile, continuous delivery, DevOps, whatever the buzzword is, we are delivering software in smaller chunks at a faster pace. So how do we manage performance risk in that context? I think there's a connotation that a performance engineer is up for that challenge and knows how to do that, or at least is beginning to engage with those concepts. And ultimately, it's about adding real value. A performance engineer is someone who doesn't just know how to use a tool and run a test, but is actually thinking about why they're doing what they're doing. I think that's the real key thing. So I'd love to hear what you think. How do you define a performance engineer? Do you think the term's good or not? I'm going to continue this series, and if you have any topics which you think need discussing, I'd love to hear it, and I want to get other people on the show to discuss these things as well. I will be back with a traditional performance time where I cover the basics again soon, And I did want to do a quick shout out to Perf Bytes, who I think they're the creme de la creme of software performance conversationalists. And I think that's fantastic, and what you guys do. And I will see you guys next time.